Good morning, good morning, good Wednesday morning, hump day. Yes, it's hump day. We are up early this Wednesday morning. Well, it's not really early. I've been up early. Been up for a while, but decided before I leave for work, because Wednesday is my late in day, that I would do a video. And so here I am. Yay. We'll give it about a minute or so. I'm not sure who would come on at this time. Some of you would be at work. Some of you may be asleep. If you work nights, we will see. But we will start in just about a minute. All right. Someone's joining me. I'm starting in about 10 seconds, guys. For real, for real. All right, let's go ahead and get started. We are starting a new book of the Bible. Yay! But really, it's continuation of the last book we read, which was First Samuel. And First Samuel ended with the death of Saul and all of his sons, except one. Well, his three warrior sons, put it that way, including Jonathan. It was a very bitter end to a disobedient reign of Saul. And we open up in Second Samuel, sort of kind of continuing from where First Samuel left off. And First Samuel spans about 40 years. They're not sure at all who wrote it. Theologians don't really agree on who wrote the book of Second Samuel. There have been some theories that maybe Prophet Gad wrote it, or maybe Prophet Nathan wrote it, but they don't have any documented proof, I guess you would say, over who wrote this particular book of the Bible. But it aligns very much with where First Samuel left off after Samuel's death. The book is all about the reign of David. And so it starts, and you'll see in this very beginning chapters that we're finna start now, you will see that David becomes king over a smaller sect, because before he becomes king over all of Israel. And pretty much this is about the rise, the fall, and all in between of David's reign, right? We'll get to see a lot of popular stories that you've heard about David. Unfortunately, and I noticed this over time, people, you can be as great as you want, right? For as great as he is known for Goliath in First Samuel and killing Goliath, probably in Second Samuel, the thing that he's greatly known for is Bathsheba. And you will read about that in Second Samuel. I mean, everything that he's done in Second Samuel, and you'll see all of the great things that he does. Probably the most renowned thing that he's known for in Second Samuel is Bathsheba. But before we get into all of that, we will start. So First Samuel opens up with sort of David learning that Saul and Jonathan are dead. So if you remember, the David was living with the Philistines at the end of First Samuel. He started living in their camp and pretending that he was on their side, pretty much so that he could just be done with Saul following him everywhere, because he knew Saul was not going to follow him into the Philistine camp. And so he was living with the Philistines, but then it came a time when the Philistines were going to fight against the Israelites. And at first, David thought he was going to go with them. The king was okay with it, but the king's men was like, no, we're not taking an Israelite to fight Israelites. So they sent David and his 600 men back to their camp in Ziklag. And then that's when they found out that their camp had been terrorized and their wives and children had been taken, along with all their goods. And then David had to go, that's the one where David said, hey, Lord, should I pursue? And the Lord said, pursue, recover all. And so he goes back, gets his stuff back, comes back. And so he is not at this war between Philistines and the Israelites. And so he is none the wiser. This is the days before cell phones and any fast way to communicate things. You found out things through messengers. And so you would have to wait until someone who was there or knew about what happened actually came from wherever there was to where you were to tell you about what happened. And so David, in chapter 1, is approached by someone who was there. And in verse 1, it says, after the death of Saul, David returned from striking down the Amalekites and stayed in Ziklag 2 days. So it was 2 days before he even knew what happened. And on the third day, a man arrived from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dust on his head. When he came to David, he fell to the ground to pay him honor. And basically, he begins to tell David this story about how he was on Mount Gilboa and actually ran into Saul, who was leaned over on his spear. Hey, good morning, Flo. And if you remember, Saul was hit by an arrow, but wasn't killed. And he asked his armor bearer to kill him, and his armor bearer refused to kill him. And so Saul sort of leaned over on his own sword to try to kill himself. But what this guy is saying is that he came upon Saul while he was leaned over on his own sword, but he still wasn't dead. So, this was a miserable death that Saul was going through. He's already in pain because he was shot by an arrow, which didn't kill him. And now he's leaned over on his own sword trying to kill himself, and he's still not dead. And so listen to what he says. He says in verse 6, I happened to be on Mount Gilboa, the young man said, and there was Saul leaning on his spear with the chariots and their drivers in hot pursuit. When he turned around and saw me, he called out to me, and I said, what can I do? He asked, who are you? An Amalekite, I answered. Remember, it's the Amalekites that David just got through fighting that took his wife and children, okay? He said, I'm Amalekite. Then he said to me, stand here by me and kill me. I'm in the throes of death, but I'm still alive. So I stood beside him and killed him because I knew that after he had fallen, he could not survive. And I took the crown that was on his head and the band on his arm and have brought them here to my Lord. And so this is David's first finding out about Saul, and about Jonathan, and about how they were killed, right? And so this young man brought him a report. And so afterwards, David and all his men, they kind of went into their grieving and mourning ritual. They mourned and they wept, they fasted, and all of that. And so, but then, David said, whoa, why were you not afraid to put your hands on the king, right? God's anointed one. And so even this person who thought probably they were going to be more rewarded by David because I'm running to David. Because he didn't have to find David, right? But he purposely went to find David to tell him that Saul was dead, probably thinking he was going to get rewarded. And here David is saying, why are you so happy to come tell me about this? And second, why why did you kill the king, right? I'm sure the young man's thinking was, well, he was already dead. I just helped the inevitable. But in David's mind, it was like, you did not fear killing the king, right? And if you think about it from David's point of view, why would I bring you into my leadership, right? When, remember Saul's closest person to him, his armor bearer, refused to kill him. Okay, so why would I bring you in? And I know that you don't have no problem killing the king, right? And so David actually has the guy killed. In verse 16, he says, "For David has said to him, your blood be on your own head. Your own mouth testified against you when you said, I killed the Lord's anointed." And so from then, David actually writes a lament to Saul and Jonathan. And pretty much a lament is a sad song. Think of it like that. Or a sad poem or a sad song. It's a book of the Bible called Lamentations, which is sad songs or sad poems. And the rest of chapter 1 is this lament. And in this lament, and he talks about his friendship with Jonathan. In verse 26, he says, "I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of a woman." And so, unfortunately, in the day and age that we live in, people have taken this and perverted it and made it to mean that somehow Jonathan and David had an inappropriate relationship, but there's nothing in the Bible that suggests that at all. And this really is a brother to brother love that David is talking about that he had with Jonathan. This statement is the same sort of statement where Jesus said a friend sticks closer than a brother, right? So it's just an analogy, like your love is better to me than a woman doesn't mean I love you like a woman or I love you as a woman. And so, but people have taken this to try to justify homosexuality in the Bible. And so we have to be careful in reading stuff out of context, right? Especially when it is not supported in any other places in the Bible, and actually the opposite is spoken of in the Bible. And so that's chapter 1. In chapter 2, the men of Judah come around David. He asked the Lord actually, basically, where do I go from here? Remember, he was in Ziklag with the Philistines who just killed everybody, and no, he's an Israelite. So I can imagine the same army who did not want to take him with them would come back to Ziklag and like, you know what, let's just take him out, right? So David is asking, where do I go from here? And the Lord is telling him to go to Hebron in Judah. And so he goes to Hebron in Judah with his 2 wives. Remember, at this time, he's been married 3 times, but Saul took his first wife and gave her to somebody else. And so he has 2 wives with him, although he has 3 wives. And he goes with his 2 wives to Hebron, and there they actually made him king of Judah and anointed him king of Judah. So he's king over 1 tribe, not over all of Israel. So watch the progression here, right? And we'll talk about that progression in detail in a minute. But he's king over 1 tribe in Judah. And then he actually, as his first act of king of Judah, he sort of give accolades to Jabesh Gilead. And if you remember, Jabesh Gilead were the first people that Saul went to war with, war for as king. And they actually came and got Saul and his son's bodies off a wall that the Philistines had hung them on and buried them properly. And so David gives them accolades for doing that and promises, that they will be blessed because of it and shown kindness and faithfulness because of what he's done. And then on the other side of that, Saul has a son that's left. Ishbosheth is his name. And remember, the ruler of Saul's army was Abner. So it'd be like the captain of the army, right? Abner actually is instrumental in making sure that Saul's son becomes king over all of Israel. Now remember, Saul was first king, but there was already a lineage thing happening sort of with the priests, right? So with the high priest, then the next high priest, the oldest son of the high priest would become high priest after he left, right? So, after he died. So it was natural, and especially in how kingships worked in other nations, for them to think that since Saul was king, that the next thing is his next living son would be king after he died, right? So keeping the kingly lineage. So in their defense, they may have thought, oh, this is the natural thing to do. Saul's son would become king after Saul. Hi, Toya. But God had already ordained another king. And so because of that, that's what made this improper, because God had already ordained David as the successor and not any of Saul's children. But Ishbosheth becomes king over Israel. But listen to this, verse 10, at the latter part of verse 10. Well, I'll read all of verse 10. It says, Ishbosheth, son of Saul, was 40 years old when he became king over Israel. He reigned for 2 years. But the tribe of Judah, however, remained loyal to David. So even though Ishbosheth became king over all of Israel, he was not king over Judah. So all of Israel minus Judah, because Judah said, I'm going to serve David. So there comes a time when a decision has to be made, right? Because you want all your territory. So Ishbosheth and David, Judah and Israel have to come and fight like who's going to be the king. So they actually, Abner says, why, Joab is the sort of leader of the army for David, and Abner is the leader of the army for Ishbosheth. They basically said, hey, why don't we just have some of our men do some hand-to-hand combat in front of us? And they do that for a little while. But then it comes a time when, the war just kind of gets big. And so everybody's kind of running after everybody to fight. It just gets kind of messy. And so it says here that Asahel, who happened to be Joab's brother, starts running after Abner, which is kind of inappropriate because, like captains kill captains kind of thing, right? But he starts running after him, and Abner keeps telling them, look, stop running after me. I don't want to hurt you, right? Just go, just go back to your people. I don't want to hurt you. But he keeps running after Abner. And so remember, Abner is the leader of Ishbosheth's army. Joab is the leader of David's army, and Joab is the brother to Asahel, who is now running after Abner. So Abner basically turns around and kills him. So he kills the brother of Joab. And so that causes, of course, Joab to go after Abner, like, oh my God, you killed my brother, right? But then, Abner kind of talks some sense into him, so he thought. Joab stops pursuing him, and says, okay, we don't have to like ruin the nations over this beef with you, right? It's sort of kind of what he says, right? And so in verse 30 it says, then Joab stopped pursuing Abner and assembled the whole army besides Asahel. 19 of David's men were found missing. So 19 of David's men were found missing, but David's men had killed 366 Benjamites. And remember, the Benjamites were already a low tribe because they had been wiped out before. So they were already a low tribe. And then they took Asahel and they buried him in his father's tomb. And then Joab and his men marched all night and arrived at Hebron by daybreak. So they actually start an official war between the two of the households. And David just grew stronger and stronger, and the Israelites grew weaker and weaker, right? Already we saw in this little hand-to-hand combat thing they were having that David only lost 19 men, but Ishbosheth lost to the tune of 300 plus. And so God's favor was always with David. In the meantime, sons were being born to David with his two wives. And so it names sort of the sons that were born to him. And then we find out that there were more than two wives. So along the way, David is taking extra wives along the way. And he's a king. So, he can have as many wives as he wanted. And at those times, bigamy was sort of ingrained into the culture. And it's just what they did. And especially as kings, they could have as many wives as they wanted. Just simply because they were king, right? And so he took more wives, had more kids. And his sons are named here. But then something happens, right? Ishbosheth accuses Abner of sleeping with his father's concubine. And it must not have been true because Abner was very upset. Or either it was true and it was like, what business is this of yours, right? But it doesn't really say if it was true or not. But he was upset that Ishbosheth was coming on him like this. And he actually defects and goes to David and, kind of joins David's side instead. So the leader of the army with Ishbosheth, the whole person who, orchestrated him becoming king in the first place, sort of leaves Ishbosheth and says, okay, listen, I'm going over here with David. And so he makes an agreement, a treaty with David that he's going to sort of fight with David. And David says, the only way I'll do this, right, is if, listen, I'll read it to you because this was amazing to me. And I feel like it was just the principle of the matter. But verse 13 of chapter 3 says, good, said David, I will make an agreement with you, but I demand one thing of you. Do not come into my presence unless you bring Michal, daughter of Saul, when you come to see me. Then David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, son of Saul, demanding, give me my wife, Michal, whom I betrothed to myself for the price of 100 Philistine foreskins. So do you remember this? This is David's first wife. And he couldn't pay the dowry price for her. And so Saul said, just give me 100 Philistine foreskins. And he actually bought 200 in payment for his wife. So Ishbosheth actually sent him his wife back. But remember, Saul had given her to somebody else. So she was actually somebody else's husband at the time. And here in the Bible, it says in verse 16, her husband, however, went with her weeping behind her all the way to Bahurim. Then Abner said to him, go back home. So he went back home. So can you imagine? This has got to be like, at least, 10 or so years maybe that David was giving her as a wife. So she's technically, at least 7 to 10 years she's been married to someone else, and now she's being taken from that husband and given back to her original husband. Doesn't tell us how she felt about it at all, but her husband was devastated and followed her weeping and crying. But nevertheless, she was David's husband first. David wanted her back. And like I said, I don't even know if he wanted her back because he loved her so much, or that was his first love, or if it was just the principle of the matter. Don't take my wife from me. So it doesn't really say, right? So then we come to Joab wasn't around when David was making this agreement with Abner for Abner to kind of defect and come on their side. Joab wasn't around, and so when Joab hears about it, he's very upset. Verse 24 of chapter 3 says, so Joab went to the king and said, what have you done? Look, Abner came to you. Why did you let him go? Now he is gone. You know Abner, son of Ner. He came to deceive you and observe your movements and find out everything you are doing. So basically, Abner is like, he's a spy, right? He don't want to really come over here for real. He's a spy, right? But remember, Abner is upset because, remember, Joab is upset because Abner killed his brother. And so Joab actually leaves and goes and finds Abner, tricks him into coming back to Hebron, and then kills him, right? He avenges the blood of his brother and kills Abner, just stabs him in the stomach. When David heard David heard about it, he just was like floored, because I'm the king, right? I'm your king. You know, Joab has been with David for the long haul almost, and he's like, I'm your leader, I'm your king, right? So you need to respect the decisions that I make. You can't just decide that you want to do what you want to do, right? Because you know he killed your brother. So verse 28 says, later when David heard about this, he said, I and my kingdom are forever innocent before the Lord concerning the blood of Abner, son of Ner. May his blood fall on the head of Joab and on his whole family. May Joab's family never be without someone who has a running sword or leprosy, or who leans on a crutch, or who falls by the sword, or who lacks food. Joab and his brother Abishai murdered Abner because he had killed their brother Asahel in the battle at Gibeon. Then David said to Joab and all the people with him, tear your clothes and put on sackcloth and walk in mourning in front of Abner. King David himself walked behind the bier. So basically, you know, they had these big funeral processions where they walked them to the grave place, right? And so basically, he's making Joab walk in front of him as a sign of respect for Abner, and he walked behind. And then he wrote a lament to him, right? And he really wants everybody to understand that Abner was a great, you know, commander in chief, and that you know, he died at the behest of Joab unnecessarily. And then in chapter 4, Ishbosheth is, which remember is Saul's son, who was leader over all of Israel, is coming to an end, right? So in verse, well, first it tells us about Jonathan's son, right? Jonathan had a son who, when Saul and Jonathan were killed, he was 5 years old, and his maid tried to run because, you know, the thing was to kill everybody, right? So the maid runs with him and actually either drops him or hits his leg or something, but he becomes disabled. And his name is a huge name that I'm going to mess up, but we'll call it Mephibosheth. We'll call him M for sure. How about that? So M, right? Hi, Marilyn. M is the son of Jonathan, right? But Ishbosheth sort of has people who are out to get him, right? So let's read verse 5 of chapter 4. It says, now Rechab and Baanah, the sons of Rimmon and Beer, set out for the house of Ishbosheth, and they arrived there in the heat of the day while he was taking his noonday rest. They went into the inner part of the house as if to get some wheat, and they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and his brother Baanah slipped away. They had gone into the house while he was lying on his bed in his bedroom. After they stabbed and killed him, they cut off his head, taking it with them, and they traveled all night. They brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron and said to the king, here is the head of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, your enemy, who tried to kill you. This day the Lord has avenged my lord the king against Saul and his offspring. And so these were actually Saul's men, who were leaders, you know, of his raiding band, who turned on their king. And obviously they had not heard about like the servant that came and told Saul. I mean, all this servant did was came and told David about Saul and his son's death. Now you gonna bring me the king's head, right? Obviously they hadn't heard about what the servant did, because somehow they thought that David would be proud of them for cutting off the head of the king of Israel, right, at the time. And of course, we know David was not happy about this. In verse 9, it says, David answered Rechab and his brother Baanah, the sons of Rimmon and Beerothite, as surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me out of every trouble. When someone told me Saul is dead and thought he was bringing good news, I seized him and put him to death in Ziklag. That was the reward I gave him for his news. How much more when wicked men have killed an innocent man in his own house and on his own bed, should I not now demand his blood from your hand and rid the earth of you? So basically, David is like, y'all wicked. Like, why would I want y'all on my team? Y'all, I mean, the man didn't even have a chance. He sleep in his bed and y'all kill him and behead him. Why would I want you on my team, right? And I think this is a good place to place a pin just for a second. You got to be careful when you befriend people who are treating other people with disdain or other people evil. I mean, if they're doing, other people a disservice or talking about other people or, treating other people, with attitude or in ways that you wouldn't want to be treated, why would you be friends with someone like that? Because being friends with someone like that means that you just don't know when they're going to turn on you. And it amazes me because I see sometimes people are so shocked. They're like, oh my God, I can't believe she did me like that. But you've seen her do other people like that, like for all your friendship. But now all of a sudden when it's turned on you, it's different, right? We've got to be careful. We got to be more zealous like David. Not killing people now. Not killing people. It's not what I'm saying. But more zealous like David, that we don't take people unto us or let people into our camp who have done others poorly, thinking that somehow we'll be different. And so David gives an order for his men to take them out. And then finally in chapter 5, David is anointed king over all of Israel, right? In verse, let's go to verse 2. Let's start from verse 1. All the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, we are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on their military campaigns. And the Lord said to you, you will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler. And when all the elders of Israel had come to King David at Hebron, the king made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. So here's the succession that I talked about, and how, it doesn't work like this in our day and time. People want to, get saved on a Monday and pastor on a Tuesday. But there was a succession, right? David was anointed king as a boy, right? The Bible says that he was a young man. So most people think he was like 15, 16 when he was, when Samuel went to his house and found him in the field, had to call him in to anoint him. People believe he may have been about 15 or 16 then. Anointed king at that time. And then somewhere in his 20s, he got the 400 that expanded to 600 men who followed him, and he was their leader of these 600 men. Remember, they were the despondent, the discouraged, those that were in debt. I mean, they were, he had to show himself that he could lead those group of men first, and then he became king over Judah, which was a smaller sect of people, and that lasted 7 years. He was king over Judah for 7 years, and then after he became king over Judah for 7 years, then now he is made king over Israel, and he'll be king over Israel for 33 years, but total king 40 years. And it's just a succession. I mean, he learned at every twist and turn what to do and how to do it, right? He didn't just, Samuel anoint him king in his daddy's house, and then he go take on Saul and say, hey, I'm about to take your place, and become king over all of Israel. He learned even from the trials that he went through, even from the struggles that he went through with Saul, even the struggles that he went through on the run, even everything that he went through, he learned was teaching him how to be a better king. And we need to know that our life is succession like that. I mean, when the Lord promises us something or tells us something or tells us we're going to be something or tells us we're going to have something, we've got to realize that there is proving ground, there's testing ground that comes with that, and we just can't rise up and be who God called us to be without going through those trials and those tribulations along the way. In chapter 5, it goes on to talk about how he married more women and took in more concubines and had more kids. And then it ends with it ends the chapter 5 with him asking the Lord, should he fight the Philistines? And the Lord telling him twice to go ahead and do it. In verse 19, so David inquired of the Lord, shall I go and attack the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hands? The Lord answered him, go, for I will surely deliver the Philistines into your hands. I want to make that our memory verse because in just the latter half of that, the Lord answered him, go, for I will surely deliver the Philistines into your hands. And I want you to remember this verse because to me, you remember David had lived among his enemies, and his enemies had actually taken him in. Now he's got to go and fight what he had lived among. Y'all getting where I'm going with that, right? He had to go fight what he lived among, right? And so he's going to the Lord first, asking, is this okay? Are you going to deliver them into my hands? And the Lord is saying, surely I would. And there comes a time in our life where we have to fight what we used to live among, right? We have to fight against what used to bring us comfort, protection, safety. But now we have to trust in the Lord and fight against what we used to just, take comfort in. And so we have to do that in our lives. And so now that David is in a different place in his life, no longer on the run, no longer hiding, I have come into who God has called me to be. Now I have got to do what God has called me to do. And so we have to remember, just as David had to rise up and fight against the people who once helped him, we have to now think about how there comes a time in our own lives when we have to rise up and fight the good fight of faith, which may make others upset, angry. They may not understand. They may not want to befriend us anymore. They may not want us at the family functions. But you have to fight on behalf of the Lord to stand for what you know God has placed in you. All right, that is it for today. We are going to talk after this tomorrow. Well, I'm sorry, not necessarily tomorrow, maybe later on today if I can sneak it in. But we're going to do another video talking about David and his first pursuits as king. He's going to make sure that he gets the Ark of the Covenant in the right place. He's going to talk about this house of the Lord that he wants to build. We're going to talk about his many battles and many wars. He's going to set up some officials. He's going to take care of M. Remember Jonathan's son? He's going to take care of M. And we'll go on from there. So stick with us. Continue to read. I will catch us up. Don't worry. But just thank you guys for all the times that you join me in these videos. Hopefully you're getting something out of them. Until next time, know that I love you and God loves you too. In Jesus' name, amen.